Wade Marlowe?
Headed for Wyoming or Idaho or wherever a drifting cowhand went when a job soured and a woman made her feelings plain. Gone for good. Wasn't coming back. Best forgotten. Louisa believed it too, mostly the way you believe a thing that hurts too much to keep questioning. What the whole county had wrong, what it would take a strayed calf, a mended fence, and one bad night in October to finally set right, was the direction. Wade Marlowe hadn't ridden west that September. He'd ridden 4 miles east, to the Circle K spread, and he'd been close enough the whole autumn to see her chimney smoke every single evening from a ridge he'd taken to calling, privately, the stupidest decision of his entire life. Her father had warned her about hired hands, plainly, more than once, in the last hard years of his own life. A drifting man falls for a place before he falls for the woman on it, Louisa. You'll not always be able to tell which one he's courting. Amos Ashcroft had said that with a father's particular blend of love and fear, and he'd meant it about most of the seasonal men who'd worked his 400 acres over the years, and he had not, strictly, meant it about Wade Marlowe, though Louisa had never quite managed to explain that distinction to him before he died. Wade came on for the spring roundup the year Amos took sick, stayed through the hard summer nursing along with everyone else, and by the time Amos Ashcroft died in August, Louisa Ashcroft understood two things with equal certainty. She was alone with 400 acres. And she was in love with a cowhand her father had warned her against, in the specific way fathers are usually right about, except this once. The rumor started with Silas Dunmore, who ran the rocking D2 sections over and had wanted the Ashcroft water rights since before Amos got sick, and who understood, with the particular patience of a man used to getting land eventually, that a grieving young woman alone with 400 acres was considerably easier to pressure than a woman with a hired hand standing between her and every visitor who came calling. He didn't invent the rumor cleverly. He simply said, to the right people, in the right tone, that it seemed peculiar how quick Wade Marlowe had gotten close to a woman who just inherited good land and better water. Fortune hunter was the word that traveled, and it traveled fast, the way an ugly word does in a small county with not much else to discuss that season. Louisa never believed it for one moment. Wade Marlowe believed, within about 2 weeks of hearing it, that believing it wasn't the point. He came to her in September, hat in hand, on the porch where he'd have rather said almost anything else in the world. "I mean to leave, Louisa." "You don't mean that." "I do, and I'll tell you exactly why, because you deserve the truth of it and not some story about restlessness." He turned his hat over once. "Every week I stay on here, courting you plain, Dunmore's story gets a little more believed. Not by you. By the county. By the men who'll sit on any dispute about that water someday, if it comes to that. I'll not be the reason you lose your father's land to a rumor I could have starved out by simply going." "Then don't go far," Louisa said, already understanding, already dreading, what he actually meant. "Far enough that the story dies," Wade said. "That's the whole of the plan." What Louisa understood, watching him ride out that September morning, was that he was leaving to protect her. What she did not understand, what he did not tell her, because a plan explained in full loses half its usefulness once the person it's protecting starts arguing with it, was precisely how far enough actually meant. Wade rode west out of sight of the Ashcroft place, which was the only part of the plan anyone in Cedar Bend ever witnessed, and then, once he was well clear of any watching eyes, turned south and then east, and rode the long way around to the Circle K spread 4 miles off, where the foreman knew him from a previous season and took him on without asking too many questions about a man who preferred, for reasons of his own, that word of his hiring not travel back toward Cedar Bend directly. He'd left the county's gossip. He had not, strictly, left the county. The Circle K sat close enough to the Ashcroft place that Wade could see her chimney smoke most clear evenings from a rise at the edge of his new outfit's north pasture, and he took to riding that fence line more often than his actual work required, which the Circle K's foreman noticed and, being a decent man who'd guessed most of the true story within a month, chose not to mention. Wade told himself, the first few weeks, that he was simply keeping half an eye on a neighbor's welfare, the way any decent man might. He was, in point of fact, watching for smoke every evening like a man checking a pulse. And more than once, on nights when the smoke didn't rise on schedule or rose thin and late, he rode the 4 miles over in full dark, did whatever quiet work needed doing, a fence down, a strayed calf, a woodpile run low, and rode back before first light, leaving nothing behind but evidence that puzzled Louisa considerably more than it worried her. She noticed the first mended fence in early October and assumed, reasonably, that a neighbor's stray stock had simply wandered through and somebody responsible had fixed what their own animals broke. She noticed the second mended section 2 weeks later and thought it a mild coincidence. The woodpile, replenished overnight in a week she'd been too exhausted from harvest to keep up with it herself, was harder to explain away, and she stood looking at a stack of split cordwood one October morning with a particular unsettled feeling of a woman doing arithmetic that refused to add up honestly. She asked around carefully, without quite admitting why she was asking. Nobody in Cedar Bend claimed the work. Nobody had seen anybody doing it. Wade Marlowe, everyone reminded her, had left for Wyoming back in September. The strayed calf was what finally broke the mystery open, on a cold night in late October when a heifer went missing from the north pasture and Louisa, exhausted and half convinced she was chasing shadows on top of livestock, saddled up after dark to go looking rather than lose an animal she genuinely could not afford to lose. She found the calf a half-mile out, bawling and stuck in a boggy draw, being worked loose by a man she recognized by silhouette before she recognized him by anything else, because 400 acres teaches a person the particular shape of somebody they've watched work 100 times. Wade Marlowe. He went very still, caught exactly as thoroughly as a man can be caught, mid-rescue, for miles from where the whole county believed him to be several states removed. Louisa. I can explain the calf plain enough. The rest of it's going to take longer. He told her the whole of it, standing in a cold October draw with a rescued heifer between them, because there was no longer any version of events that didn't require the truth. The Circle K. 4 miles. Not 4 states. A foreman who'd guessed and kept quiet. Weeks of watching chimney smoke like it was the only clock that mattered, and riding over in the dark to mend what needed mending, and riding back before anyone woke to notice. You let the whole county believe you'd gone, Louisa said, and her voice was doing several things at once, anger and relief, and something that hadn't fully decided which of those it wanted to be yet. I let Dunmore's story die of starvation, same as I told you I would, Wade said. I never once said I'd gone far. I said I'd go far enough. I let you assume the rest, because you'd have argued me out of the plan if you'd known the actual distance, and the plan needed doing regardless. That's not honesty, Wade Marlowe. That's a lie shaped careful enough to feel like the truth. He didn't argue that. It was, on its plainest reading, entirely fair. I know it, he said. I've turned that particular piece of it over most nights on that ridge, wondering if protecting you was worth doing it by half-truths. I don't have a clean answer for you. I only know I couldn't watch Dunmore take your water and your good name in the same season, and I couldn't think of another way to starve his story out that didn't cost you something worse. Louisa Ashcroft stood in that cold draw a long moment, working through 6 weeks of grief for a man who had, it turned out, been 4 miles away the entire time, close enough that she could have ridden to him on a bad afternoon and hadn't known to. 4 miles, she said finally. You've been 4 miles off this whole while. Close enough to see your chimney smoke every clear evening, Wade said. Which is a fact I'm not particularly proud of, considering how it sounds said out loud, but there it is. Silas Dunmore made his actual move in November, once he judged the county's memory of Wade Marlowe sufficiently faded and Louisa Ashcroft sufficiently alone, and he made it plainly, over coffee he hadn't been invited to share, at her own kitchen table. He proposed a partnership on the water rights, generous terms on the surface, terms that would have handed him functional control of the Ashcroft Creek access within 2 seasons if she'd signed anything he put in front of her. Louisa listened to the whole proposal with the particular patience of a woman who already knows her answer and is simply curious how long a man will talk before noticing she hasn't agreed to anything. I'll consider it, Mr. Dunmore, she said, which was not remotely what she meant, and which sent him off her porch considerably more confident than the situation actually warranted. What Silas Dunmore did not account for, what he genuinely could not have accounted for, having spent 2 months believing his rumor had done exactly the job he'd intended, was that the man he'd driven off was 4 miles away and rode back into Cedar Bend the following week entirely in the open, no longer bothering with careful distances or dark hours or unclaimed fence mending. Wade Marlowe walked into the county land office with Louisa Ashcroft, publicly, on a Tuesday, and helped her file the exact paperwork Dunmore had been counting on her not understanding well enough to protect herself against. Water rights properly recorded, boundaries properly surveyed, nothing left ambiguous enough for a patient neighbor to quietly absorb over a few generous seasons. Dunmore heard about the filing by Thursday. He did not come back with a second offer. The county's story rewrote itself within a month, the way small-town stories do once they're finally handed the actual facts instead of the convenient guess. Wade Marlowe hadn't left for Wyoming. He'd taken work at the Circle K to starve a rumor that would otherwise have cost Louisa Ashcroft her water and very possibly her land, and had spent 2 months doing quiet unclaimed labor on her behalf from 4 miles off rather than let a decent woman's reputation get spent on his account. Cletus Owens, who ran the county paper and loved a good correction almost as much as he loved a good rumor, printed the whole of it eventually, plainly, and Silas Dunmore found himself, for the first time in a long career of patient land acquisition, the subject of a story he had absolutely no say in shaping. He kept the rocking D. He never again tried the Ashcroft water. Wade and Louisa married the following spring, on the Ashcroft porch, in the same spot he'd once stood turning his hat over explaining a plan she'd spent 6 weeks grieving before she understood it. He gave up the Circle K position, obviously, and came back to work the land he'd once left rather than let a rumor cost her, though he still, for the rest of his life, rode the north fence line most evenings out of a habit 2 months of watching chimney smoke had apparently carved into him permanently. Louisa teased him about it for 40 years. "Checking the smoke, Mr. Marlowe?" "Old habit," he'd say, every time, entirely unbothered by being caught at it. A man who's once had to watch a woman's welfare from 4 miles off doesn't much care to stop watching close up, once he's finally allowed to. There's a version of this story Cedar Bend still tells at weddings, decades on, and it's always the same lesson, delivered the same way. Everybody in that county was certain, that autumn, that Wade Marlowe had left. They had the fact almost entirely backward. He hadn't gone. He'd simply gone exactly as far as the truth required and not 1 mile further, close enough the whole while to mend what broke, to watch for smoke on the hard nights, to be found, eventually, precisely where a person looks last. Not far away at all. Just close enough to be missed by everyone who never thought to check the nearest ridge.